In her play MilkDrunk, Kathleen O'Malley integrates her education in theater, women's studies, the social and therapeutic application of the arts, and her early experience of motherhood. As Kathleen shares, the play is the result of her need to explore both inner and outer barriers to breastfeeding her first child, including the lack of support for family life in the arts. Trained at the London International School of Performing Arts, Kathleen works to broker meaningful connection between artists and audiences through innovative engagement programming, content-rich digital and print communications, and groundbreaking educational initiatives.
You want milk? Gracie, milk? I tell Matt the best way to imagine it is to picture placing his dick in a door and slamming it. Every 3 to 4 hours or the baby starves. He was sympathetic beforehand, but I really think that helped drive the point home. Panda C nipple sandwich, Panda C nipple sandwich, then switch. Did you know that on a nipple, there's not just one hole? There are many holes. Up, up, down, over lip, open wide, 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 wider, now in. I am the mother, it will always be my fault. When do I pee? Remember this. Great. So my earliest experience with breastfeeding was actually when I was about 12 years old. So I'm one of 4 children. I'm the second oldest. And there was a late arrival to our family, my sister. So my mother had breastfed all 4 of us. And I have very fond memories of looking up in the sort of dappled glow of the sunlight coming down on my mother nursing my sister in the chair. So as I approached motherhood, I was all in. I was 100% on board. Read the science, had some family support there, and my mom. This is in MilkDrunk, the play. My mom said on many occasions and repeated it that nursing and Tupperware were the only 2 things in life that never disappointed her. Which, as one of her children, I couldn't help but take offense to that. But anyway, all joking aside, it was something that she really treasured as a parent, and so I was all in.
That's great. So you became a mother, and it sounds like you were planning to breastfeed and all ready for that as part of your experience. What were the barriers that you encountered?
Mm-hmm. So just to be clear, I never set out to be a breastfeeding advocate. I'm an actor and a storyteller. I had anticipated that and actually part of the friction for me and my husband to eventually, to actually make the decision about having a child was, what would that do to my career? Ironically, it was actually going through birth, a natural childbirth that was had some medical interventions that included some trauma, going through a breastfeeding journey that had plenty of bumps and was not easy, and that actually was the opportunity for me to do the play of a lifetime for me. A lot of actors have a dream of doing a solo show, and that was something, a sort of fantasy I'd harbored for a long time. And it was actually the very thing I thought was going to shortchange my artistic career, motherhood, taking time off for motherhood, that actually was the platform for a real coming together for me of activism and storytelling. So you asked about some of the barriers. it's hard to talk about the barriers without talking specifically about what it was like, what exists and what kind of barriers exist in my field and in the profession of the performing arts. I think the thing that, I understood breastfeeding as a concept. I'd watched friends breastfeed prior to doing it myself, but really at least in the early months, the total all-consuming nature of it, that desire, that need to be constantly available for the child, the physiological changes, the discomfort. It really took living through that experience to understand why a real breastfeeding journey can be so disruptive to full-time work. And the fact of, the breastfeeding requires, you can't do it in a vacuum. It requires your physical presence. This is a synchronous activity. And to be a performing artist, it's you there in the room. There's no remote, there's no work from home in that situation. So I think, trying to breastfeed and also trying to envision a life back in the performing arts. I was looking at a career that has very modest pay, very minimal, if any, parental leave. It's filled with young people who are, willing to burn the candle at both ends and prioritize the performance above anything else, at least in my realm. And long days, long nights, being away from home. So what ended up being at odds, it wasn't just the breastfeeding, but it was actually the question of what kind of mother do I want to be? What kind of time? How do I want to enjoy and experience these early days of motherhood, the first year of life? And here in the States, because there's, no state-sponsored parental leave, no federally supported parental leave, it really became, it really put my professional goals and really being able to envision a professional future in my field up against motherhood. So I think that those were some of the external barriers. And then there were the internal barriers, a lot of input. Even in the hospital, getting conflicting advice from different, like a series of 3 lactation consultants who stopped by my room, all had very different opinions. One was telling me to drink dark beer, and I was like, wait, this pamphlet over here says no alcohol. Like, I was like, I want to get an A+ in breastfeeding. Tell me A+. Like, I will eat what you tell me to eat. I will not eat what you just tell me. But I think because the breastfeeding advocates, the people fighting for breastfeeding awareness, are sort of just trying to meet people where they are. In the end, over here with me, it was like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Hold the baby like this, lean back, the side, switch sides back and forth, let the baby decide. Like it, just the crush of information. And for someone who is, got a background in research, and I'm an intellectual, I want the content, but in the end it was very, very, very overwhelming. Yeah. Internal and external.
So your way around these barriers, over, under, through, was to integrate this considerable amount of education that you have in women's studies and somatic psychology as used in theater and the arts and theater of the oppressed, and your motherhood experience, and specifically your breastfeeding experience. And you put all of this into the creation of MilkDrunk. So can you tell us about this way around these barriers that you created?
Well, the play that was eventually written started off as a very personal document. So in the early hours, still in the hospital, I was compelled to write down the details of the crazy night I had had before. My birth was induced. It all happened very quickly. I sort of tore through the stages. There was some birth trauma. My daughter had to be revived. It was all happening at 4 a.m. There was a wild thunderstorm and snow and cars alarms going off in the parking lot. It was sort of all the makings, I'm a theater person, all the makings of a, ecstatic, Grecian, theatrical event. And I was just compelled as a storyteller to write this down. I didn't want to miss a thing. But then over the months and then over that first year, it turned into a document. And the sort of recurring refrain through it all was nobody tells you this. They don't tell you. I'd read everything. I'd read so many books. Nobody tells you about the, sometime within the first 10 days, there's going to be a time when the baby is just ravenously hungry. And you think, I just fed you 5 minutes ago. Why is this still happening? Nobody tells you about the smells, sort of a bestial musk as a nursing mom, the letdown, letting down in the middle of the diaper aisle at Rite Aid, as we were leaving the hospital, it's the agonies and the ecstasies. It took me forever to, I talked to every breastfeeding consultant they sent my way in the hospital, and it still took me weeks and weeks and a lot of pain and bleeding and chafing to explore that lean back method, the anthropological breastfeeding. And also I think I feel fortunate that early on I did find a community. And that was where I had my first taste of what felt like, oh, this is biocultural coherence. Mothers in a circle telling stories, sharing tips, watching each other, hearing each other, watching children of all ages interact, seeing a vision. My little bald little squealing little kitten, is going to turn into that, soon, seeing yourself on a trajectory. And then the pride of, being a first or second, trimester mother, postpartum, the fourth and fifth trimester, being able to welcome into the group a new mother, perhaps who's having challenges. So that was really the community was one thing, and which became an opportunity to tell stories. Also, I was probably just weeks out of the hospital telling everybody who would listen, I'm going to make a play. This is so crazy. Colostrum, the nursing that holds the conflict of information, the baby, the sounds, this is so crazy. There's no one's telling you about this. I'm going to write a play. I'm going to call it MilkDrunk. And in the end, I threw my hat over the ring, applied for a new play development program, made a commitment, and then it essentially ended up kind of in every waking hour I had, sort of penning the details of what I was living through. There's a picture I sent you, Lisa, of myself pumping backstage opening night of MilkDrunk, subtitled "An Actor Prepares." So that's really the story, and then the opportunity to engage with families, to engage with mothers, to engage with partners, to engage with elders, also practitioners, healthcare providers, nurses, a chaplain who works at one of the major hospitals in my area came to see a show. So those conversations ended up also being very kind of reinforcing for me the importance of the play, that breastfeeding and motherhood is not a niche subject, that this is something that is an appropriate subject matter for a mainstream theatrical stage. And I've been really excited that there's the outer community too, of the creative arts community and the performing arts community. And really, even within the last year, the last couple of years, there's been a movement in our field inside of, honestly, the conversation of racial justice, of pay equity, of inside of the Me Too movement, harassment, looking at motherhood, new motherhood, parental support, and related issues like family leave, elder care, really looking at our field of the performing arts and identifying where is the field prohibitive, to this whole sector of our population. And there's been this kind of lie, this story that the performing arts is kind of a young person's game. And it really doesn't have to be that way. And we're depriving ourselves as a field and also as a public who's consuming these stories when we exclude a whole part of our population. So there's ongoing activism in that area. And I've just been proud to have my little story, my piece, to be a part of this larger movement as well. It's an honor.